Welcome to Code and Concrete, the leading podcast for proptech, conversations about the built environment, and other exciting innovations. If you learn something new, please consider following and leaving a positive review. Enjoy. Hi folks, joining me in the studio today, I have David Bratslavsky. And David is the founder and CEO of QuickData.ai, a proptech company building automation tools that let multifamily real estate investors, brokers, and lenders extract rent roll, T12, and offering memorandum data directly into Excel-based financial models. Additionally, QuickData.ai provides AI training to commercial real estate firms to upskill every department to create efficiency and time-saving workflows in-house. David, thank you so much for coming on to Code and Concrete. How are we doing today?
Good. Matthew, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, to kick off the conversation, I want to learn a little bit more about you. How did you get into real estate, and how's that journey been going from the industry as it was to this inflection point now where AI is this big craze and we're finally digitizing?
Yeah, I actually come from a tech background, but I had some savings. I wanted to invest it in real estate, specifically multifamily. So I found a pretty successful multifamily fund. And I said, listen, I'll be your intern acquisition specialist. Just teach me how to do it. And I'll come in, I'll do it for free, and that'll be my education. So I came in for a period of time, and the principal basically taught me everything he knows about underwriting multifamily real estate for acquisitions. And I understood that really most of the manual effort was copying and pasting data into your underwriting model so that you could actually start the analysis. So a bit of monkey business before you get into the actual analysis. So when ChatGPT and all these other, now Anthropic, made their strides in AI and made them so useful and helpful, given that I come from a tech background, I said, listen, there must be a way to automate this data extraction once and for all, do it accurately, do it quickly, do it reliably. And so we got started and we built QuickData.ai to solve that problem of manual data extraction. Now we automate it so you could jump right into analysis and save yourself a lot of time.
Right, because data collection, extraction, structuring everything into a model, that can be the slowest part of a deal. Everything is disparate. You got to find all the information, put it into the right place, continually refresh that. I mean, whether we're talking about a deal or a transaction, financing, insurance, whatever it is, any sort of legal or capital event, the data has to be there. You're sending out people to do that. And before automation, it was more like 10-finger automation, where you had people entering in all of that data. But that's a bottleneck for firms that are trying to grow because they can't always hire as many people as they want. So this is really interesting how AI is kind of democratizing the playing field and giving people access to all of that essentially computational power that just the institutions had historically. But let's start with some definitions. A lot of people are talking about AI right now, but there's many ways that could be applied. It's very abstract. AI, ML, LLMs. When we are looking at data extraction, what sort of AI is being used here? And maybe walk us through the life cycle of this tool. Where do we start? What happens? What's the output?
We start in Excel. So what we understood is that Excel is really where most underwriting model lives. And because everybody has their own preferred underwriting model, right? And so as a result, Excel, even though it's this old school tool, it still sort of dominates the industry precisely because it's so flexible and versatile. And so what we decided is we're going to layer the solution on top of how people work already and their existing workflow and their preferred underwriting model so that they could use it however, they need consistent with their workflow and existing tools and models in Excel, something that they're used to. And so what we developed is this Excel add-in. And I could sort of demo it for you in just a moment, but basically without leaving Excel, you upload the rent roll, the operating statement or T12, and it extracts the data, standardizes it, imports it into your model exactly where you need it to go. And then you could jump right into analysis. So thinking sort of structurally, our approach was, listen, AI will not make decisions for you. That's not what it's for. but it will automate the time consuming manual repetitive task of data extraction and data entry. That's what we automate so that the analyst or the principal or whoever doing the underwriting could actually, start with the judgment and the analysis much, much quicker rather than wasting time on something that AI can do automatically.
So once teams are able to streamline the data extraction and the mapping, which means that we're taking the data, putting in the right cells, essentially, and then we can build out these models. How does this change deal flow? How does it change how teams work, how quickly deals can move forward, and the overall quality?
Yeah, perfect question. So it really sort of 10x's your existing analyst or underwriting specialist, whoever's doing the underwriting, right? So if before you could do, let's say, 10, 15 deals a month that you were looking at seriously because it just took so much time to get the OM and get the rent roll and get the T12 and extract all the data and categorize all the line items and then run the deal only to find out, oh, no, it doesn't really pencil. And then you start over again. So now you could do each deal in under 5 minutes because you're jumping, all the data is already in there. You could, layer on top of it your assumptions, let's say loan to value or whatever assumptions you're making for that deal. And then as you see right away within 5-10 minutes whether or not it pencils out. So one person could now do the work of three people and look at a lot more deals. So we see a lot of our clients, a lot of real estate investors, syndicators, looking much more deeply at a particular market because they could analyze literally every single deal in their market without hiring additional headcount, simply because of this one tool that automates the most time-consuming part of the process. So you could see if a deal pencils in 5 minutes, and if it does, then obviously you dive into further due diligence. But yeah, basically now you could analyze every deal on the market that you want without thinking, oh, is this going to take up too much time? Because it no longer does.
Are you doing anything to include AI in the analysis as well? Or is there somewhere where you draw a line in the sand and say AI is good at structuring the data, but we want human context or human wisdom that understands context in order to actually analyze the deal?
Right. So this is where the training comes in. Specifically, what we recommend, and again, you could do it with a variety of LLMs, but I'll recommend one in particular, is installing the Excel add-in for Claude. And what you could do is once you input all the data and you actually run the analysis on your deal, without leaving Excel again, you could open up Claude and you could ask it, spot, the red flags in my analysis, just as an example. And what it does, and it's almost magic, is that it'll run through your deal, it'll understand your model, where your assumptions or inputs are, what the outputs are, what your projections are. And it'll tell you, like kind of as an advisor sitting over your shoulder, saying, maybe the DSCR is too low. You might not be able to cover the loan given your cash flow assumptions, right? So it knows enough to give you such recommendations. So step one is automating the data input, right? That's what QuickData does. Step two is analyzing yourself because ultimately you're responsible for that analysis. Step three is having a fresh set of quote unquote eyes or AI eyes, right? Let's call it that. Specifically, as I mentioned, Claude, Excel add-in, but although, other LLMs could do it as well. And all you have to do is prompt it and say, listen, review this deal, see if you find anything wrong or something I should double check. And then based on that analysis, you could sort of say, oh, I missed something maybe. I have a fresh set of eyes looking over it. It took an extra 3-4 minutes. And now, I could spot that and maybe, rerun my assumptions and, see if this deal really pencils out. So yeah, it's basically automate the data, but then also have AI look over your analysis and spot any red flags. And it does it really well. And you could use Claude, you could use ChatGPT through the Excel add-in. And there's obviously other tools available as well.
Have you discovered that either in the extraction of the data or the analysis that there's still some weak spots, like some tasks that the AI is struggling with, or maybe areas that's not as accurate? Just to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we always say double check everything. So our tool specifically, although frankly, you could build even a Claude skill, and we could get into what a Claude skill is in a moment. But our tool isn't the exclusive tool you could use. Obviously, that's the one we developed at QuickData.ai. But like any tool that extracts data, ultimately the responsibility lies with you to double check everything, right? We make it pretty easy through the interface that we have to double check. I'm sure other tools, do that as well, but always double check the data. However, it is pretty accurate. It's like 99 point whatever accuracy because there's, layers of, automated checks that go into it, whatever. I won't get too technical, but it's very accurate. However, no tool, no automation is ever going to be 100% correct 100% of the time. So we always say, listen, double check everything. Typically, that's just seeing that the totals as extracted match with the totals in the original document. So, for example, if the total rent in the original document added up to $150,000 a month, you typically see that summary in the rent roll, and then you look at what's been extracted. And if all the individual values add up to, say, 150,000 or whatever it is, then you know that those totals match up. Therefore, the individual values that have been extracted that go into that total is accurate because it also matches, right? So that's just like one quick example of just double checking the data, which takes literally an additional 60 seconds. And then you have that kind of assurance that, okay, indeed, my inputs are correct. I could get on with the analysis.
You mentioned Claude skill. Do you want to touch on that briefly?
Yeah. So what a Claude skill is basically a set of instructions that you save, right? So you don't have to retype the same set of instructions over and over again. So the set of instructions could be extract this particular data. Let's say it's a rent roll and input it into my model here. That's one set of instructions. And once you have that working, you could save it as what's called a skill. So you don't have to retype it every single time. You just say, call on the skill. You could call it, my extractor or whatever you want, and then you could, leverage those set of instructions pretty quickly. Another set of instructions might be double check my underwriting, right? And again, I keep kind of focusing on underwriting as our use case, but it could be with any kind of, asset management and reporting. And, we could get into really a wide variety of uses, but I'll kind of stick with underwriting as kind of our canonical example. You could say, listen, these are the 10 things that I need you to double check every single time. And you could input those instructions into Claude. And then you could say, I want to do this every time I underwrite. Save this as a skill and name that skill underwriting double checker. I don't know, whatever you want. And as a result, next time you underwrite a deal, instead of having to ask Claude a detailed prompt from scratch, you simply call in that skill. You say, double check my work, and it does it. And it gives you the, whatever it is that you instructed. So it could be like the series of red flags or whatever it is that's, consistent with your model. So to make a long story short, a Claude skill is simply a set of instructions that you saved so that you could use it over and over again.
Gotcha. Gotcha. You mentioned an interesting word, canonical. I use this word a lot. Some people know what it means. We could also say authoritative or definitive. And this made me think the data is being extracted, which means that it can lose context or the source is therefore detached. So, what's the relationship between these models that are being filled in by AI and some of the source documentation? Is there a way to track that back or trace that back?
Yeah, you always have. Our particular tool doesn't go into that, but again, I'm just talking broadly and to answer your question. But you do want to have either a sort of a document management solution where, and it could be something as like you save it in Dropbox or Box or, whatever solution you use to manage and share your files. And so everything that you extract from should be saved under that deal name, right? And that could be done through a CRM, and we could recommend a few. That could be done simply by, you have a set of folders under, however your naming or convention is, and you save them under the, the deal name, whatever it is. You want to just save all the source documents that go along with the underwriting so you could always trace it back. Again, I don't know if I properly answered your question, but there's obviously just several ways to do that. One is using a CRM when you upload all the data and documents that you use. The other one is simply to kind of save it in the same folder so you could always get back to it when you need it.
Well, it got me thinking, although the show is hosted by Building, we seldom talk about my company. I think there's a way for us to work together because we're sort of that data trust or that canonical layer. And then we hope that in use cases like yours, the data can be extracted. But in doing so, it can always be audited back to that source document that's been verified, it's been credentialed. We know if it's the right version. That way, as data gets refreshed and it's being used downstream, we can trust it. Not only do we see the model in front of us and we've saved time putting it together, but when we hand that over to a counterparty, they can also save time in trusting it and not having to question the integrity of that model.
I
Shifting
was going to say,
gears.
when
Oh, go
we
ahead.
work with clients, we actually do recommend building quite a bit. I didn't want to sort of, I don't know whether I should have focused on just, one thing but I do want to say I have used building, and I'm going to shamelessly plug your company for a moment, but building.inc. It's very good. And you guys have done an incredible job thinking through the actual workflow. There's one thing to vibe code something, right? As the kids say these days. There's another thing to really understand the end user and the challenges of managing all this data, because you don't necessarily want to have, actually, you don't want to have it in just like random, not random, but even, a bunch of folders in Dropbox or whatever the case may be. So the fact that you guys developed this solution to solve this, data management and sharing and doing it with a very intuitive UX UI and user experience, we do recommend your solution to our clients, because what we always say, listen, AI is great, but if there's something off the shelf that just works for you, it doesn't have to have some AI moniker, right? Like everybody's using AI now, building is using AI now, but it doesn't have to be this fancy, .ai anything. It just has to work really well and be designed
Right.
really well. So we recommend you guys all the time. And I just want to kind of, tip my hat to you guys for building something good.
Well, I appreciate that. There's layers to this all. There's data, trust, intelligence, and then markets at large. But they're all connected. You can't have intelligence or successful AI or markets that are moving price and value without having that foundational layer as well. But at the same time, if we're just a data solution and it's not being used in a model, if it's not being analyzed, then it's static. So it's all very cooperative, and it's an exciting time for so many companies like yours and ours to be plugging in. So a little bit of business development in real time. What I was going to say is, because you mentioned that you also train firms to use AI. So if there's solutions like yours and ours out there, where do we tell real estate teams build this in house versus rely on a third party? How do you usually go about teaching companies what they should delegate versus what they should maybe build themselves?
Yeah, I always recommend that if there's something off the shelf that you're comfortable with, meaning it's a secure solution, it's reputable, others have used it, you feel like your data isn't being, misused or abused, take it off the shelf and use it. Like, don't have, you're in the business of real estate, not in the business of software development. So if you see something like or other solutions that work for you, use them. The bias is always take something off the shelf, use it, customize it around your needs, and you're good to go. Step two is then, it doesn't mean that you can't use AI on top of that or parallel to that. So a lot of our clients, like, I know I need to use AI. I don't really know where to get started. So we basically help them first, listen, familiarize yourself with the tools. Everybody has chatted with ChatGPT, but let's go a little bit beyond that. We mentioned Claude Skills or ChatGPT has an equivalent. If you have something that is a repetitive process that makes you money, right? But you're doing it manually. Why are you still doing it manually when you could literally spend one day automating it, turning it into a skill or a ChatGPT equivalent, and then calling on that skill to do this repetitive process for you? That could mean, reviewing your underwriting deal. That could mean inputting data for asset management. That could mean, a lot of this stuff, again, is, there's platforms that do that. Like, you guys have a lot of functionality. So if it's already there, use it off the shelf and customize it around your workflow. If it's not there, then I would say skills covers the rest. And if you're truly enterprise level and need something bespoke, so then, we help folks develop a solution around that. But again, my bias is if there's something on the shelf that you could use it. If it's not available off the shelf, Claude Skills or an equivalent will get you there 80% of the time. And for the other 20%, we could talk about something custom.
Right. So there's really no excuse not to be integrating artificial intelligence at this point. You can build it, you can buy it, but it's obvious that it replaces a substantial amount of manual work, things that create friction in deals or just operating the property and maintaining it or whatever it might be. Huge opportunity. However, we're not at the point that we have widespread adoption. So what have you seen has been the friction that is still holding back adoption? What's been some of the feedback? Is it education? Are people uncomfortable with the tools, data privacy? What's the word on the street?
At the enterprise level, there's some concern about data privacy, yes. But I would say most people are just sort of a little bit afraid. They're old school. They've been
Mm,
doing something a certain way. They know how to use Excel. They've always used Excel or, some other tool that they've been comfortable with. And they know real estate. These are real estate professionals, right? They're not necessarily nerds like me and you and, super interested in, the latest, greatest tools and gadgets. Some are, but many aren't. And they simply have this kind of mental, I don't want to say block, but an apprehension of just learning something, not just that it's new, but it's moving so quickly. And every day there's another tool, there's another process, another workflow, and I just can't keep up. My business is real estate. So that's something that we sort of help with or encourage people to do is listen, it's not that difficult. Sit down, watch a YouTube video, if that's what it takes, but talk to somebody that knows what they're doing, that could train you, that could do it with you, that could hold your hand through the process. And it is not that difficult. I think once people see that, let's say, building a Claude skill to automate some repetitive process, I'm just, again, using that as a basic example, how simple it really is. People then get excited. Then they're like, oh, let me build another skill, or let me automate that. Let me string them together into a workflow. Well, how do I actually store this? So, it kind of goes from there. So I think it start with an easy win. Okay. Learn something as simple as a Claude skill so that you could automate one thing. And then I think you very quickly, you'll realize that it's not as difficult as you had imagined. And then you could go from there. And obviously it is helpful, when somebody's right there holding your hand through the process so that you don't get stuck. That's really another thing that I recommend. You don't have to work with Quick Data. You could work with, anybody you trust. But certainly we can help you, but others as well. Like find somebody that could hold your hand through it, and very quickly you'll see how easy it is to do it on your own.
right. And I would say one thing that real estate teams should consider is the cost of not implementing artificial intelligence. So there's the cost of going through a slow process, time consuming, a lot of hours racking up, but there's also an opportunity cost in the market. And I think that this is going to be a differentiating factor between the good, the great, or actually the greats, the good and the extinct, if we were to look at it that way. There's going to be firms that excel in the market. They're using AI efficiently. Those that are experimenting with it and they just have good operations overall. And then real estate developers or asset managers, portfolios that no longer exist because they were too stubborn or apprehensive.
You hit the nail on the head. It's really a matter of survival. And if you don't feel it now, you'll feel it very, very soon. If your competitors have people who are doing the work of three people, right, relative to manual labor, who's going to win over time? They could look at three times more deals. They could close three times more deals, or they could close the same amount of deals at a cheaper overhead cost and run much more efficiently, save money, and therefore be more profitable. So who's going to win in that scenario? The people who are efficient, the people who enable their staff, their key personnel to use AI and do the work of three people, or folks that are afraid to, learn something new that's critical, and therefore fall behind. So efficiency, that sort of efficiency that AI allows, is going to be not just a matter of I would say, making more money, but really just survival. And it's going to be felt very, very quickly. And if folks aren't feeling it now, over the next couple of years, the survivors will be those who use AI, and the rest will simply, I don't even say have to adapt, but it might even be too late at that point because they've fallen behind.
Let's look a couple years into the future then. What does the real estate industry and market look like? Where's AI going to be prominent? Where do you think it will not be super relevant? Because there's still relational portions of this industry or things that require human context. So where's it going to be widespread? Where do you think it's not going to be? And then what's the broader effect on the industry slash market?
Yeah, so I've been obviously hyping AI. Right now, I'll kind of address, to your point, the limitations a little bit, and where human intelligence is going to be irreplaceable, even in a few years' time. Anything that's a repetitive process, that'll be done by AI. Those are the only companies that will survive, and therefore, that's going to be the new standard. So, data extraction, anything having to do with any kind of repetitive process that doesn't require, I would say, decision making. However, at the end of the day, AI can't tell you, invest in this building. And even if it can tell you, are you really going to put in $50 million because some black box AI, spit out a yes or a no? You're not. You're going to have to analyze the property, take responsibility for that analysis. That's not going to change either now or well into the future. You mentioned relationships. Those are not going to be replaced by AI. Those are still going to matter. That's, at the risk of stating the obvious. And then three is the ingenuity as to what to do with an investment. So if you're investing, let's say, in a value add, there's no way AI could say, well, you need to spend $30,000 on a unit and here's what you're going to do with it. I mean, it could spit out a stock answer, but like only you would know where the value add comes from. AI will never replace that kind of judgment and, I would say, taste and, uh, discernment. I mean, those are really, like very human qualities that are always going to be in demand, frankly, even more in demand, right? Because if before just kind of the raw labor of underwriting a lot of properties and maybe you're good at Excel, that would save you on a, wider team. Right now, so much of that will get automated. So the only thing that's going to be left is going to be, using judgment and relationships and the ability to leverage that into a tasteful analysis of what to do with an investment, right? And I really, folks will say, I will do that too. And I suspect it never will because the competitive edge is always going to be human intelligence.
Exactly. And so building off of terms like judgment and intuition and creativity, which humans excel in, even if AI is widespread, the answers that AI produce for people creating prompts or whatever are very standardized. It's drawing from the same information online. So if we all start asking, how do we add value to this unit? And it says, put in a great fridge, this type of flooring and whatnot. And then everyone starts doing that. Again, the human element comes in and says, how can we get creative with this? How can we do something that is not standardized at this point, and start modifying this or just looking for information that could not possibly be gathered by the artificial intelligence, whatever tool is scraping, and saying, I think that this trend in the market is unrecognized. Because if I do a quick prompt, what's the hottest market right now, and it's going to pull up a couple cities, but if I know something that the AI doesn't know, just pulling off of public data, then I can be ahead of the curve once more. So I think that's really important to point out because if you look at how quickly we all started using M dashes and everyone on LinkedIn is using the pros of it's not this, it's that, or listing the three items, that's a perfect example of how tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people suddenly all started speaking the same way because of AI. And so if we're underwriting our properties the same way or we're doing analysis on the market and it's pulling the same information, giving us all the same answers, we will have to get wise again as to how to get ahead of that AI and therefore stay ahead of the curve. Again, context clues or just knowing what the AI doesn't, or in-person conversations where the AI just simply cannot exist. The same way that to get around the very AI-like language, now people are reintroducing typos or trying to replace the M dash with the semicolon, whatever. Just creative ways to show, hey, this is unique. It's intuitive.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, maybe not the best example given WeWork's history, but co-working existed as an asset category, right? And then WeWork came in and realized that the advantage is creating the right atmosphere. AI is never going to create an atmosphere, right? That's a uniquely human value add, right? And there's so many other examples we could get into. But yeah, I mean, to your point, AI is going to basically level us up to all the same level. And then it's going to be, again, the human factor that pushes somebody, to have an edge versus the competition. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap up by talking about quick data. What does the rest of 2026 have in store for your company? What can we look forward to? And then if you want to include a call to action, maybe how could people get involved?
Yeah, so we build tools, AI tools for commercial real estate industry. One is data extraction, the one I focused on. There's a few others. And then the other thing that we do, and really this is our focus at the moment, is we go into a company and we say, look, you need to have your entire company, every department, leverage AI to the fullest in order to stay competitive. And we help you get started and we hold your hand through the process. And we make sure that over the next, 4 weeks or 8 weeks, that everybody's not only comfortable with it, but building their own workflows and automating the things that they need to automate and then doing it self-sufficiently. So instead of relying on me to do it for you, even though I can, we, have this philosophy of we teach you how to fish, right? We come in and we make sure your entire organization is comfortable, leveraging tools, whether they're off the shelf, whether it's, building ink or, there's some other solution that's out there, or where the gap still exists, automating it in-house on their own. And that's something that we teach you how to do. And that way you're self-sufficient and you're AI ready and you're beating the competition and you're doing it with confidence. So the call to action would be just go to quickdata.ai, and hit us up and we'll help you out.
And I will have links to, I have your social media as well as QuickData's website. So people can just go down to the show notes, click on any of those links, and figure out what you're all about and why they should be leveraging AI. Because really, the cost savings, I mean, we have some data coming out as well about just how much time can be saved in something like the appraisal process when data doesn't have to be re-verified over and over again with each party that comes in contact with it. So the future is very optimistic. I'm very excited to see how real estate grows because it's lagged in terms of innovation. It's been unproductive for a long time, which is in part because of the nature of real estate. We build big structures and hopefully they stick around for many decades. But I think AI is forcing the hands of many and saying, time to do things differently, which is okay because the built environment is super important to take care of and build wisely. So, David, thank you so much for a fantastic conversation, very insightful, and folks who are trying to figure out where to drop in AI, I think this just gave them quite a few notes and a good roadmap in terms of where to use it.
Amazing. Matthew, thank you for the opportunity.
All right, well, I'm wishing you all the best in the meantime then. Take care, David.